Good morning, Backyard Kids. This month, we've been learning all about wisdom. Now, all wisdom comes from God, so it's important that we talk to God whenever we need help making an important decision. We've also learned that we should stop and think and pray before we decide how we should act on whatever's going to come next. We've also learned, and we're going to talk about that more today, that we can talk with other wise people that God has placed in our lives to give us advice when we have a hard decision to make. So today, I'm going to tell you a little story about that. But first, I'm going to give you a little background. We've talked a lot about King Solomon the last few weeks, and for really good reason. He's known as one of the wisest people who ever lived. You may remember that Solomon became king after his father David had died. And Solomon was very young when this happened. And God came to him in a dream right after David died and Solomon became king, and he told him to ask for one thing that he really wanted. Out of all the things he could have asked for, Solomon asked for wisdom so that he could rule God's people well. And God gave that to him. And during the 40 years that Solomon ruled, he did some amazing things, but also people from all around came to him so that he could share the wisdom that God had given him. A lot of this wisdom is written down in the book of Proverbs in the Old Testament, including some advice on how we can gain wisdom. Basically, in Proverbs 13:20, Solomon said that if you're around wise people, you can become more wise. But if you're friends with foolish people, people who make bad decisions, you may find yourself in trouble. Unfortunately, Solomon's own son didn't take this advice. He thought he always knew what was best. Now, his name was Rehoboam. It's a very hard name to say. In a minute, we're going to just start calling him King R because it's so much easier. But when Solomon died, he became the new king. And like I said, he thought he knew it all. Something to know though, Solomon was very wise and he was very fair and just, but he was also tough. He made his people work really hard. So when King R became king, Solomon's son, all of his people were very curious as to how he was going to rule them. If he was going to be tough on how hard they worked and how many breaks he gave them and all that sort of thing. So one day, a group of people led by another guy with a kind of interesting name. His name was Jeroboam. Okay, so we're going to call him Jerry because this one is also hard for me. So a group of people led by Jerry came to see King R. Now, back to our story. We've got King R, we've got Jerry. Jerry has brought a group of the workers to see King R to find out how he's going to treat them. So he told King R, listen, your father was great, but he worked us hard. If you could just give us a little bit better working conditions, a few more breaks, maybe some vacation days, we are always going to serve you well. Well, to King R, it just kind of sounded like they wanted to slack off. Of course, he had never worked a day in his life, so he didn't know what they were going through. But he told Jerry to come back in 3 days, and then he would have an answer for him. So Jerry left, and then King R knew, well, he has a decision to make, and it's his first big decision as king. So this would have been a great time for him to take his father's advice and go to God to ask for wisdom. But he didn't do that. Now, he did at least consult some of the advisors, some also wise men who had worked with his father during his reign. He told them what was going on and what the people wanted, and asked if they had any advice. So they said, well, we think you should be kind to the people. We think that they've got a point, that if you can be kind, give them some of what they want, that you'll win your loyalty and they will always be true to you and they will serve your kingdom well. Well, that didn't really sound good to King R. He really was afraid that they weren't going to get as much done for him, so he thought, well, who else could I ask for some advice on this? So he was like, oh, I'll ask my buddies. Now, these were guys he had grown up with that were also spoiled rich kids. And he went to them and said, hey, got my first kingly decision to make. These guys want some time off. They think my father was too rough on them. What do you think I should do? And they were like, oh no, show him who's boss. Tell him that if your father was tough, you're going to make him look like he was the best boss in the entire world. And he was like, you know what? That sounds like a good way to lay down the law and make my first decision as king. So when Jerry came back, that's what he did. Now, that advice doesn't sound like very good advice to me, but apparently to King Ar it did. So when Jerry came back and he asked, the king what his decision was, he said, get ready for even more work. My father may have been tough, but I'm going to be tougher. You're going to see who the true king is. So I guess this foolish young king was thinking that they were just going to bow down and say, oh, okay, you're right. We're so sorry we asked for anything. But instead, Jerry said, you know what? We're not doing this work for us anyway. You're the only person that's benefit from it. We're going home. Take care of your kingdom yourself. So Jerry left, took all of his people with him, and basically they separated from the kingdom. So these people broke off, and now, while King Ar still ruled just in Judah, the rest of Israel chose a new king. Guess who they chose? They chose Jerry, who had gone to bat for them and who knew what they needed. So the lesson here is simple, guys. Be careful who you choose as friends, and make sure that the people that you go to for help and for advice are wise and are helping you truly make good decisions. King Ar didn't listen to the good advice. He listened to the advice of people that were not very good friends and weren't wise. And it cost him almost his entire kingdom. So we should learn from his bad example and spend our time with people who are wise and can lead us toward God. You guys have a great week, and don't forget to go to God in prayer when you need help.